Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. On February 26th, we are hosting a CEDH tournament on our Discord. It will be 100% proxy friendly, first place gets $500, and 2 through 4 all get $250. All you have to do to participate in the tournament is sign up to our Patreon or sub to us on Twitch. Check us out on Twitch every Wednesday evening for great games of CEDH with special guests every week. If you sub to Twitch, you get additional perks such as access to our Discord. We will be going to SCGCon Indianapolis this coming March. We will be playing CEDH in the Command Zone and recording games while we are there. Stop by and say hello, and let's all jam some games together. Our Mox Pearl Patreon rewards are back. Every month, we get together with our patrons and record a game to be on the channel. That's what this game is tonight. So, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ryan piloting the partner pair of Rograkh, son of Rograkh, and Ikra Shadiki the Usurper. This deck seeks to resolve either a Conspicuous Snoop combo, Doomsday, or Bolas's Citadel to combo off and win. Ryan's opening hand contains a Taiga, Birds of Paradise, Finale of Devastation, Skirk Prospector, Mox Amber, Command Tower, and a Scheming Symmetry. Next, we have Dante piloting the partner pair of Kodama of the East Tree and Vial Smasher the Fierce. This mid-range deck seeks to create value and eventually resolve Razaketh to combo off and win. Dante's opening hand contains a Zealous Conscripts, Dockside Extortionist, Deathrite Shaman, Mox Diamond, Bloodstained Mire, Overgrown Tomb, and a Deflecting Swat. After that, we have Sean piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Thrasios Triton Hero. This deck seeks to grind advantage and win with either Razaketh the Foul-Blooded or an Ad Nauseam. Sean's opening hand contains a Survival of the Fittest, Notion Thief, Smothering Tithe, Vampiric Tutor, Swan Song, Soul Ring, and a Wooded Foothills. Finally, we have Alex piloting the partner pair of Kodama of the East Tree and Kraum, Ludovic's Opus. This deck uses effects like Neoform to cheat out extremely game-changing creatures onto the battlefield and take over the game. Alex's opening hand contains a Phantasmal Image, Veil of Summer, Mental Misstep, Flooded Grove, Flooded Strand, Force of Vigor, and a Cloudstone Curio. Without further ado, let's kick off this fine French Freudian fellowship of friends. Ryan wins the 2 people 1 body challenge and gets to start us off. Ryan draws a card for turn and plays a Command Tower. He casts his commander, Rograkh, son of Rograkh. He casts a Mox Amber. He casts a Skirk Prospector. He casts a Birds of Paradise. Everyone wonders what else is coming, and Ryan passes the turn. Dante draws a card for turn and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts Deathrite Shaman. Dante ends his turn. Sean draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts a Soul Ring. Sean passes to Alex. Alex draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. Alex gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Taiga. He casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 2. He fetches up a Goblin Recruiter onto the battlefield. Recruiter enters, and Ryan fetches up a Conspicuous Snoop, a Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker, a Mog Fanatic, and a Torch Courier, all onto the top of his library in the order he chooses. The table sweats, and Ryan passes. Dante draws and casts Mox Diamond, discarding Overgrown Tomb. He plays an Arid Mesa. He activates Deathrite, exiling Alex's Flooded Strand to help cast his commander, Vial Smasher the Fierce. Dante gives the turn to Sean. Sean draws and plays a Tundra. He casts Smothering Tithe. The table sighs, and Sean passes. At the end of Sean's turn, Alex casts Force of Vigor, exiling a green card, destroying Ryan's Mox Amber, and Sean's Smothering Tithe. Alex draws and plays a Flooded Grove. He casts Phantasmal Image. It enters as a copy of Goblin Recruiter. Recruiter enters, and Alex fetches up a Dockside Extortionist onto the top of his library. Alex gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and casts Conspicuous Snoop. It resolves, and Ryan reveals a Torch Courier on the top of his library. He sacrifices Skirk Prospector, adding a red to cast Torch Courier through Conspicuous Snoop. Ryan then reveals a Kiki Jiki off of the top of his library. In response, Alex pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, targeting Courier. In response, Ryan casts Autumn's Veil. Veil resolves, Mental Misstep fizzles, and Torch Courier resolves. Ryan then sacrifices Torch Courier, targeting Conspicuous Snoop. In response, Dante casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting Courier's ability. Vial Smasher triggers and deals 3 to Sean. Deflecting Swat resolves, and Dante changes the target to Alex's Phantasmal Image. Phantasmal Image triggers, and Alex sacrifices it. Unfortunately thwarted, Ryan passes the turn. Dante draws and casts Sylvan Library. Vial Smasher triggers and deals 2 to Alex. He plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with Vial Smasher. Sean takes it, and Dante ships the turn. Sean draws and casts Windfall. Ryan cries, and Windfall resolves. Everyone discards their hands and draws 5. He plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it and pays a life. In response, Dante cracks his own Polluted Delta, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. Then Sean fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield as well. Sean casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. The turn moves to Alex. Alex draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It enters, and Alex creates 3 treasures. He casts Birds of Paradise. Alex ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays a Blood Crypt into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Impulsive Pilferer off of the top of his library through Conspicuous Snoop. He casts Jeweled Lotus. He cracks his Lotus to help cast his other commander, Ikra Shadiki, the Usurper. He moves to combat and attacks Dante with Conspicuous Snoop. Dante takes it, Ikra triggers, and Ryan gains 2. Ryan passes the turn. During his draw step, Dante draws 2 extra through Sylvan Library, paying 8 life to keep them both. In his main phase, he plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Elvish Mystic. Vial Smasher triggers and deals 1 to Ryan. Dante gives the turn to Sean. Sean draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He casts Elvish Mystic. Sean passes. Alex draws and plays a Cascade Bluffs. He casts his commander, Kodama of the East Tree. In response, Sean cracks his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. Sean then casts Ad Nauseam. The table, caught very much off guard, lets it resolve. Sean reveals a Cephalid Colosseum, Mystic Remora, Forbidden Orchard, Reanimate, Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, Bloodstained Mire, Flusterstorm, Necromancy, Chrome Mox, Bloom Tinder, Exotic Orchard, Collector Oof, Noble Hierarch, Draneth Magistrate, Flooded Strand, Morphic Pool, Enlightened Tutor, Savannah, Avacyn's Pilgrim, and a Dothy Voidwalker, deciding to stop there. Unfortunately, his Ad Naus didn't quite give him the results he wanted, and finally Kodama resolves. Alex gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He casts Goblin Matron from the top of his library through Conspicuous Snoop. It resolves, and Ryan fetches up a Dockside Extortionist into his hand. He cracks his Bloodstained Mire, pays a life, and fetches up a Bayou onto the battlefield. He casts Dockside Extortionist. It resolves, and Ryan creates 5 treasures. He moves to combat and attacks Sean with Conspicuous Snoop, Impulsive Pilferer, and Ikra Shadiki. Sean double blocks Ikra, Thrasios dies, Sean takes the rest, Ikra triggers, and Ryan gains 3. With nothing else, Ryan ends his turn. At the end of Ryan's turn, Dante activates Deathrite, exiling Finale of Devastation, with each opponent losing 2. During his draw step, Dante draws 2 extra through Sylvan Library, putting 2 back on top. In his main phase, he casts Death, targeting Zealous Conscripts in his graveyard. Vial Smasher triggers and deals 2 to Ryan. Death resolves, Conscripts enters, and Dante loses 5 life. Conscripts triggers, and Dante gains control of Alex's Kodama. Dante plays a Scalding Tarn. Kodama triggers, and he puts a command tower onto the battlefield. He cracks his Arid Mesa, pays a life, and fetches up a Badlands onto the battlefield. Kodama triggers, and Dante puts a Stomping Grounds onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. Dante casts Wheel of Fortune. Sean sighs, and it resolves. Everyone discards their hands and draws 7. Dante casts Keen Sense, targeting his Vial Smasher. In response, Ryan casts Assassin's Trophy, targeting Kodama. In response, Dante cracks his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up a mountain onto the battlefield. Kodama triggers, and Dante puts a Wooded Foothills onto the battlefield. Trophy then resolves, Kodama is destroyed, then Dante fetches up a forest onto the battlefield. Then Keen Sense resolves. Dante casts Mana Crypt. He casts Tenderwall. He casts Eternal Witness. It enters, and Dante returns Wheel of Fortune to his hand. He sacks Tenderwall and exiles Simeon's Spirit Guide for a red to help cast Wheel of Fortune. In response, Ryan pays 2 life to cast Noxious Revival, targeting Kiki Jiki in his graveyard. In response, Dante cracks his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, and fetches up a Blood Crypt onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. Then Noxious Revival resolves, and Ryan puts Kiki Jiki onto the top of his library. Then Wheel resolves, and everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Dante casts Jeweled Lotus. He casts Underworld Breach. In response, Alex casts Force of Will, exiling a blue card and paying 1 life, countering Underworld Breach. Dante moves to combat and attacks Sean with Conscripts and Vial Smasher. Sean blocks Vial Smasher, takes the rest, and dies. With nothing else, and also unfortunately thwarted, Dante passes. Alex draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Toski, Bearer of Secrets. He casts Mox Opal. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Verity Circle. He casts his commander, Kraum, Ludovic's Opus. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Kraum. Ryan takes it, and Alex passes the turn. Ryan draws and casts Mox Opal. He casts Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. Kraum triggers and Alex draws. Kiki resolves and Ryan follows up by casting Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Forbidden Orchard. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide, adding a green, and casts High-Rex Tower Scout. It enters and Ryan responds by activating Kiki, targeting Dockside Extortionist. Alex's Verity Circle triggers and he draws a card. Then Ryan creates a copy of Dockside. It enters and Ryan creates 10 treasures. Then High-Rex's ability resolves and Ryan untaps Kiki. Ryan decides that even though Verity Circle is on the battlefield, hopefully he can create enough copies of High-Rex before Alex draws into interaction to stop him. So he presents a loop. He activates Kiki, Alex draws from Verity, he creates a copy of High-Rex Tower Scout, and then untaps Kiki. He does this 8 times, and then Alex responds by casting Disallow, countering the last activated ability of Kiki-Jiki. Ryan moves to combat and attacks Dante with 7 High-Rex Tower Scouts, Impulsive Pilferer, Dockside Extortionist, and Ikra Shadiki. Dante blocks 2 Tower Scouts and then responds by tapping Deathrite, exiling Ryan's Forbidden Orchard, and adding a black. Verity Circle triggers and Alex draws. Dante casts Dark Ritual, hoping to get a draw off of his Keen Sense to get him out of this situation. Vial Smasher triggers and deals 1 to Ryan. Keen Sense triggers and Dante draws. Dante then exiles Elvish Spirit Guide to add a green and casts Nature's Claim. Kraum triggers and Alex draws. Nature's Claim resolves, destroying his own Mana Crypt and gaining 4 life. Dante then adds 3 black through Dark Ritual, has no other options, takes the damage, and dies. Ikra Shadiki triggers and Ryan gains 20 life. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Peer into the Abyss. He draws 30 cards and loses half of his life. Ryan casts Mana Crypt. He casts Underworld Breach. He casts Infernal Plunge, sacrificing Kiki-Jiki and adding 3 red. He escapes 3 and pays 2 life to cast Noxious Revival from his graveyard, putting Kiki-Jiki onto the top of his library. He casts Red Elemental Blast, destroying Alex's Verity Circle. Ryan now presents a loop of tapping Conspicuous Snoop through Kiki-Jiki's ability on the top of his library, creating more and more copies of Snoop. He then escapes Noxious Revival, paying 2 life, and puts Mog Fanatic onto the top of his library. He now sacrifices all of his Snoops through Fanatic's ability, targeting Alex, killing him, and Ryan wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what an awesome game. Congrats to Ryan on his win. He had a number of setbacks, but was able to capitalize on his opportunities to close out the game. Shout out to both Sean and Dante in this game for their awesome and powerful decks. Each one was showing just how explosive they could be. Sean getting a bad Adnaz spelled doom for him, and Dante wasn't able to quite get there with Alex's Kodama on his turn. The most valuable card in tonight's game goes to Conspicuous Snoop. This card almost won Ryan the game, but was interrupted. It later served to cast 2 separate cards off the top of his library. Finally, it was able to turn into a win. Big shout out to Bunny Joe Burton for this awesome list. Links are in the description below. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.